I've had this model in my stash for a while. A vampire queen sculpted by Anna from Gardens of Hecate. It's large, it's cool. I wanted to make something unique with it. That happens pretty often, right? You get a cool tool or a model and you want to wait for the right time. And sometimes that takes a while. I don't exactly remember when or why I chose to make this into a little automaton, but that felt flashy enough of a project for this model. What I can remember though is seeing the wonderful models Illogic has been showing off on Instagram. I'd seen the little moving bits that people made with wood and stuff, but these were the first I saw being built with miniatures. Please give him a follow, it's super cool work. I think he's been working on an RC train set or something with miniatures as well, so yeah, go take a look at that. The Vampire Queen comes in a pretty simple kit, and I think the wings being separate was what got me to think this would be a fairly easy conversion. Okay, so here's the idea. I've got a brass axle that is going to dictate the movement of the wings. Basically, when I spin the thing and the bumps go up, the wings follow that movement. I'm bending it in order to create the two bumps that I showed on the schematics. The bent axle is held in place pretty simply with some bits of wood. I know it looks bad, but we'll be hiding this in the next part. To bulk out the base, I used a big chunk of XPS foam. This was a decision I made when I still thought I'd be hiding the entire mechanism in the base. More on this later. To avoid any sort of movement constraint, I attached the wings to the body with simple steel wire hooks. And again, in order to keep the max range of movement, I'll just attach them to the wings without using glue. Here is the beast in motion. We gotta do something about that base though. Step 1 is hiding the foam. There's nothing terribly interesting in that process, so I didn't really bother to film it. It's just sculpted stonework. I also did just a bit of foam carving for the details inside the archways, and that was it. The scheme for this base was going to use snow and green stone, so I wanted something that would give us some nice color contrasting pops. And so I went with adding roses. Real quick, here's how I made them. First step, the leaves. With straight green stuff, I make a little oval and flatten it with my silicone shaper. I then score it in the middle to make the main vein, and then with my wedge-shaped tool, I stab in the serrated edge that rose leaves have. Now the flowers themselves are the more involved part, but it's still pretty easy. I start by rolling a green stuff string and then pressing it flat. I roll that band into a tiny spiral, and then with my needle tool I sort of go in and define the individual petals. Don't worry if a rose ends up a little mushy looking, because you are going to be making a ton in a row. That stuff does not use a lot of putty. I took a bit of a gamble on this one with the size of the base. I stuck with the 50mm it came with, as that was convenient for the games that I might want to use this in. Because yes, this is a gaming model in the end. The mechanism takes up a good bit of space, and it would have been way easier to hide in a larger display plinth. Out of all the stuff that I've watched and read to prepare this project, pretty much everyone that went with the miniature route made use of proper tools to build this thing out of wood. I guess next time I'll have to make friends with a wood genius to help me with this. In the end, I had to keep the mechanism visible, but that's kind of interesting, right? It's sort of purposefully breaking the immersion. A model like this on the table, to me, kind of places the focus on enjoying the act of modeling and sharing my work with my friends. You know, I'm not a lore guy. I think I care about form more than narrative content, really. So what emerges out of the games I'm playing when the illusion breaks, I find more interesting than the cohesion of an internal narrative. Yes, this has a giant visible mechanism that activates it, but is that part of the reality of the game? Is it not? I think that's kind of an interesting question. Now, is this going to turn into a little warband? The answer is maybe. I like the undead. I feel like this is a cool model to whack people with. But the original intent was to have this be kind of like a Forbidden Zone boss or a monster hunt target. I was tuning into my third favorite podcast, Hivescum, and they brought up the idea of armies being built out of different warbands. I really like that approach.
Cool.
As the kids say. And I think I'm gonna do that same principle with this model and future fantasy undead I work on. There will be, a concrete warband down the line. For now, I'm just making a Sculpting here and there. Hey, while I have you here, I've got a quick message from my sponsor. Well, okay, it's a message from me. I'm the sponsor, again. I recently released a batch of resin casts of some of my sculpts. We've got Enoch, a member of the Knights of the Sunflower, guided by his bird companion. Sprout, a root creature acting as the fearsome attack dog for the Knights. And, of course, last but not least, we've got Rat. If you want a mini, you can shoot me a DM on Instagram or on Discord or Blue Sky or Twitter or wherever I'm hanging out, and you can DM me. That stuff goes a long way to help my work, and in exchange you get a cool miniature. Anyway, back to our feature presentation. Instead of boring you with the exact details of every layer of paint I'm putting on this mini, I thought it'd be more pertinent to, invite the person who sculpted her.
I'm Anna Polanszczak. I'm a miniaturist from Zagreb, Croatia. I make miniatures for a living.
What was the first kind of like moment you decided to do full sculpting?
Well, it was gradual for me. I was into kit bashing and converting for basically since I got into the hobby, and I got more and more ambitious with it. And at some point, I was like, yeah, I might as well do a full sculpt. I think that there was like a contest by Wilhelm Miniatures. It was themed around the Great Unclean One, the Greater Demon of Nurgle, and you could do anything you wanted. You could paint a Great Unclean One or draw it or make a kit bash or whatever. And I couldn't afford a full model because it's expensive. So I just said, okay, I'll just sculpt a little one, and I sculpted a little one, and it won the competition. So that was it motivated me to go even further. Then I started sculpting, and very soon after that, someone approached me to make a full range, for a set for a Kickstarter. That's how my professional sculpting started. The thing about Great and Clean One is it's very forgiving. Like, it's a rotting, bloated thing, and if you don't have a good grasp of anatomy yet, it's quite forgiving, like to sculpt that. Also monsters, that's why I started with monsters, and I'm kind of still sticking to them because like when you're sculpting a human, you have to be a lot more aware of anatomy and stuff for it to be believable. There's a lot of like mainstream models that are produced for painters, like for the high-end painting and that kind of stuff. Yeah, they look cool, but they just don't attract me to paint them. I'm not sure what it is. It's the same with their paint jobs. They're all very polished, too polished, and a lot of the times I'm just like, yeah, that's impressive. It takes a lot of skill to do that, but I don't feel anything looking at it.
Do you ever paint anything for display yourself?
I used to go to my club's competition like every year. The competition still exists, right? But I don't really compete. I just bring stuff that I paint for gaming. I like the closest thing to that would probably be the little saints in a box that I make, the relics, right? Where I sculpt like basically a bust of a mummy and decorate it with all kinds of stuff, and it's in a little wooden box. So that's for display. It's not for gaming. But I don't do that a lot. For me, models make most sense when they're gaming pieces, because then I can set them up in different ways and photograph them, and I can play games with them. So I get a lot more from it than just it being like a finished story and that's it.
What was like the genesis of that model? Like, did Andrew call you and say like, "Oh, it'd be cool to do something like this," or was it the other way?
I don't recall exactly, but somehow we got to a point where I was gonna make a bigger model. Right?
Yeah.
I think he suggested it, so we make a Kickstarter that's a bit smaller than a full set, so just a single model. And my first idea was to do a giant, but then there's a limitation regarding shipping. It has to be like flat enough to fit into a box
Yeah.
of a certain size, and I like my giants thick, so that really kind of wouldn't work. And I think what inspired me to do the Vampire Queen was at the time I had just finished watching Adventure Time. That's probably what made me go, oh yeah, I could do a Vampire Queen.
Anna's models to me are really something special. They are, in more than one way, much more real than more traditionally proportioned human miniatures. There's folds in the skin, there's sags, there's rugged textures. I see one and I see something profoundly human. Something that I can actually kind of identify with. You know, sometimes I feel like fucking garbage and like my body is falling apart. I think there are a bunch of other rotting carcasses in the hobby, and that's why Anna's models just hit so right. I think the automaton part of this project is, I think, an extension of this feeling. It's a little routine, a cycle that the body cannot break away from. A loss of control, in a way that's maybe even more cruel than the motionlessness of a static model. You can't really imagine this having a real life in the game. I've already given it one, it's just a miserable cycle. In a way, I think editing is kind of the same as kit bashing. You take something that was made as a more or less fruitful attempt to capture reality and just hack it apart, trying to rebuild something that speaks to a real feeling in the people watching. You give a false life to images, sculpted and cast, with the action of modeling in mind. Just like a film is shot to be cut, this model was sculpted and cast with the action of modeling in mind. Just like a film is shot to be cut, in a strange collaborative effort of carrying an original work across the finish line. I might not be in the same room as the sculptor of everything I work on, like I am with the director, but the spatial barrier isn't really that much greater than the gap that I have to cross to understand the core of a filmmaker's work. In the end, it's all just playing with shapes and movement and light and bodies and all those manipulated without ever coming into contact with the reality that gave birth to them. This body always had intended movement in it, and I was just the one to lock it in this endless cycle. Yeah, I'm completely okay, by the way. I just needed to make a video to scare the people who call my work cozy and cute. Big thanks to Anna for agreeing to do this little interview. You'll find all of her links to her blog or Instagram and stuff down in the description below. Thanks for tuning in. I'm pumped to show you the projects that I've got lined up for 2025. And like I said earlier, if you'd like to support the channel, please consider picking up a model. That would be great. There's a limited amount of them available, but I'm always working towards new production runs. If everything goes according to plan, next year I'll have some nice and professionally cast models for you guys to play with. In the meantime, you can just like get the bootleg bullshit that I make in my bathroom. And yeah, that's kind of it for this video. I'll see you next year.